Respected Professor Reddy, respected parliamentarians from Bhutan, it's my great privilege to be with you, the leaders of a country which is closest to us by all means, emotionally, geographically, politically. You are like our Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, Maulana Azad, Satyamurthy, who are members of our first parliament. You are Nehru's, Patel's, Azad's of Bhutan. Media, as you know, is called fourth pillar of democracy. It is supposed to be the watchdog to see whether all the other three pillars are standing erect, doing their functions properly according to the Constitution. And it is its duty to inform the people. So media is working on behalf of the people to see whether the representatives of the people or the institutions created by Constitution for the sake of the people are functioning properly or not. We too are a fledgling democracy even after 65 years. A professor from America who was an ambassador here, Galbraith, described India as a functional anarchy. And Amartya Sen, our Nobel laureate, described as argumentative Indians. We are a noisy democracy, but there is a method in the madness. The basic values of democratic life have been imbibed by the people of the country. That is the surest way of sustaining democracy. Thanks to the leaders of older generation, the founding fathers of the country, the makers of the Constitution, who made it a point to instill the values of democracy in the common man by going for universal franchise. Election time is an opportunity for democratic values, democratic system, democratic institutions to be discussed, evaluated and strengthened. We have been having elections almost regularly, barring a brief span of emergency. That too was extended by a few months, but even Indira Gandhi, who was one of our ablest prime ministers, had lifted emergency and has gone for elections because she was a Democrat by instinct, by conviction. Media has been very strong, aggressive in India. Though we don't have any protection from the Constitution, like the First Amendment in America, Though media persons enjoy the same rights and freedoms that are enjoyed by the common man in the country, the society has given respect. It has put media on at the pedestal for the simple reason that media has been playing a very constructive role. There are instances when rulers are unhappy with us. There are instances when we were dubbed as anti-development, sensational, rumor mongers. But with all these things, we have been playing a very positive, constructive, proactive role in building a modern India, an India where there will be no hunger, no fundamentalism, no illiteracy, no gender bias, and no superstitions. The advent of electronic media has changed the whole spectrum. Earlier, the print media was known as something which is confined to the elite. With the advent of TV channels, TV news channels, even the illiterate persons are able to access to information, know what is going on around them, and participate in decision making. The fundamental principle in democracy is the faith that people, though they are illiterate, though they are living in rural areas, though they are backward socially and economically, if proper information is provided to them, they have the native intelligence and wisdom to make correct decisions. With that premise, we have lot of respect to the common man. Though he is a villager, he is a farmer, he is illiterate, he is backward, but we have respect for his common sense, for his native intelligence, and for his democratic spirit, where he would decide things on merit. That is one thing which has been helping the media. In media, there are so many sections. Print media is as old as 300 years. Then we have radio. Then we have electronic media. Then you have computers, web newspapers, websites, blogs, iPhones, mobiles, and what have you. So now it is an explosion. In India, what happened, you must be observing very closely because you are our nearest neighbors. After emergency, during 18 months of emergency, there was a blanket ban on newspapers. Newspapers were not allowed to work freely. There was censorship. A low officials of revenue department used to decide which item should go on the first page. In those 18 months, the hunger for information has grown. That the moment the emergency was lifted and elections were declared by Mrs. Gandhi, there was explosion of information. Number of newspapers have come up, number of periodicals had come up. That was one watershed in Indian media. The other watershed was 1980s and early 90s. The period of Rajiv Gandhi and P.V. Narasimha Rao. During their regimes, Rahul Gandhi was a modern-minded young Prime Minister. He wanted to lead India into the new century, new millennium, but he could not. He was assassinated. But he had laid the foundation for a technologically developed India. He was computer savvy. He had great faith in electronic revolution. He used telephone, computer for the development of the nation. So he laid the foundation for what we are seeing today. In India, 80 crores, our population is 120 crores, and we have 80 crores of people using mobile today. You can imagine the speed with which we progressed in this area. And there has been change in the ownership pattern of media. Earlier, during the independence struggle till 1947, when we got our freedom, the newspapers were 2 pages or 4 pages pamphlets. Only there were about half a dozen newspapers in the whole country, which were full-fledged newspapers having 6 pages, 8 pages, 10 pages, 12 pages every day. Times of India, Statesman, Hindustan Times, Indian Express, they were all founded before we got our independence. But Times of India was founded by Britishers long ago, about 175 years ago. Hindu in South India. But then the purpose of a newspaper was to inform the freedom fighters about the strategies of Mahatma Gandhi, about the struggles ahead, about the problems we encounter. Then with the advent of freedom, the pattern of media ownership had changed, the philosophy of newspaper had changed, the profile of journalists also had undergone a tremendous change. Now we have journalists who are partners in management. Now we have journalists who are owners of newspapers, who are managing directors. For example, I am a managing director of a company which is running a news channel and a newspaper. News channel called HMTV, Hyderabad Media Television, and a newspaper called The Hans India. And there are so many journalists who are directors of board of newspapers and houses. And there are owners like Mr. Ramoji Rao here, the newspaper baron. You must have visited Ramoji Film City. Have they, sir?
They will be going tomorrow.
Yeah. You will be entering a different world of its own. Ramoji is a newspaper baron, a very successful media man. He owns a number of channels, and his paper is number 1 here, number 3 or 4 in the country. He is a owner and also an editor. He edits his own paper. He spends even today 6-7 hours a day looking at pages and stories. And I think in the letter given to me, I am supposed to talk about the women also, women in democracy and women in media. I am very happy to find more women in this group, in this parliamentarian group. But we don't have so many women in our parliament. Actually, a struggle has been going on for the last 15-20 years to have 33% of the parliamentary seats to be reserved for women. But that is being stalled by one party or other for one reason or the other. We are not able to pass the bill. Women in politics are generally discouraged because our society was feudal. Women were not allowed to come out into the street, participate in meetings, mingle with others. They were confined to homes. They were not treated with great respect. And we have some nationalities in India which still believe in protecting women from the glare of men. And so we had to fight all these superstitions, all these traditions, backward traditions, to make way for more women to enter politics. We can boast of some women leaders, no doubt. We had Indira Gandhi, the most able Prime Minister. We have now Meera Kumar, the Speaker. We have Sonia Gandhi running the country by proxy through Prime Minister. She is the President of the Congress Party and Chairperson of UPA, the elite coalition that is ruling at the center. We have a Jayalalitha ruling a very big state in South India, Tamil Nadu. We have Mamata Banerjee, who single-handedly demolished the left front in West Bengal, and now she is Chief Minister. And we have Mayawati, who is a very strong Dalit leader in the country, who has the potential of becoming a Prime Minister any day. All these three women leaders are very strong, and the politicians, they salute to them, they are obedient to them, they dare not see straight into their eyes, they look at their feet. They are so dominating, authoritarian, and they are ruling the roost, we can say. And we have Sheila Dikshit in Delhi, who has been Prime Minister for 3 terms, and she may get elected for the 4th term also, because the opposition is at Dijare. And even outside the parliamentary democracy, even outside parliamentary institutions, we have Medha Patkar, who has been waging struggles against major dams, fighting for the people who are being displaced. And we have Aruna Rai, who was an IAS officer, who resigned her job, chose to work in rural areas in Rajasthan, and she was responsible for the Right to Information Act, a very important legislation that has given access to the people, access to information for the people. And we have Arundhati Rai, a great intellectual, world-renowned author, writer, and a very bold woman who went into Chhattisgarh forests, worked with Naxalites for days together. She lived among the crickets, among the animals, and among journalists, among the Dalam leaders of Naxal Maoist movement. So we have so many examples of individual women who made it very big in India, in social life, in political life. But when we look at the numbers, when a Politburo of a Marxist party is going on, we find only one Bunda Karat. I can name Bunda Karat also one of the very able women leaders. But we can only find her, one leader. When are 20 members of Politburo sitting, there will be only a lone leader. And when you have a Congress working committee going on, there will be a couple of leaders. Besides Sonia Gandhi, you find some 3-4 leaders. Even in BJP, you can only name Sushma Swaraj, who is also a Prime Minister candidate. And women are not treated properly even by the media. When media also, when a woman is declared the Miss India or Miss World, she was given a lot of importance. But if a women scientist is given a Bhatnagar award, nothing much of her talents are written about. Because even people in media have that block in the heads. They are not very fair. So they are taught to be fair, they are trained to be fair, but somehow in their system, somehow in their mental makeup, there is some obstacle. When it comes to looking at women, they look them as some persons who are not connected to politics, who are not supposed to be in the intellectual arena, who are supposed to be homemakers, and at best Miss Indias or Miss Worlds. That perception is sought to be rectified. We have been very consciously trying. Even in media, we have celebrities, women celebrities, who are creating waves. We have Barkha Dutt of NDTV. We have Sagarika Ghosh of CNN IBN. We have Sania Singh, who was output editor. In a news channel, besides the managing director or the chief editor, 2 persons are very important: the output editor and the input editor. NDTV has women in both the places. Barkha Dutt is the input editor and Sania Singh is the output editor. So in channels also they are getting importance now. And channels, women, the girls, are invariably given prominence because they are taken as presenters. The presenter should be good looking, and she should be able to speak sense, and that is why the post of presenters are going more for girls. So now I can say I have joined this profession of journalism 40 years ago exactly. Then we did not have many women in journalism. When I was editor of Andhra Udayam, when I launched a newspaper branch in Vijayawada, out of 32 journalists, I have recruited 13 women. That was a record in Indian newspapers. Again, there has been fall, the women representation in newspapers. but with the advent of news channels, television channels, it has gone up. As a democracy, can we say that India has been very successful? When we go out of India, people ask us, what is the greatest achievement of your country after it got independence? The reply invariably would be, the greatest achievement of India is remaining as a democratic country. Even when we are compared with China, and when China is growing at the rate of 10%, and we are not able to make even cross 6%. If people try to show us in poor light because you are not able to match China in progress. We say we have democracy which they don't have. In democracy, decisions take time, and implementation of decisions also take time, and not all decisions are implemented 100%. Only 50%, 60% is possible in democracy because you have to take everybody with you. You cannot dictate terms. You have to convince people and take along. So that is one advantage and one disadvantage for India. For you, I think you have chosen almost the Indian path of democracy. Your king would remain a head of the state, but you are allowed freedoms. You have been given rights, and you are allowed to take decisions for the development of your people. We are also given those rights and freedoms. But we cannot say, I cannot say as a journalist, as a senior journalist, that we have used all the freedoms and rights in appropriate manner to develop the lot of the people of this country. Most of the rights and freedoms have been misused. If you look at India today, when the government is presided over by a woman, when the opposition leader is a woman in parliament, when the speaker is a woman, when the chief minister of Delhi is a woman, a medical student was gang raped in a bus and thrown out along with her boyfriend. We have to be shameful. We are feeling ashamed of this incident. India as a whole should hang its head in shame. And Jaya Bachchan, you may have seen some Hindi movies. Amitabh Bachchan's wife, Jaya Bachchan, who is a member of Rajya Sabha from Samajwadi Party, she almost wept in Parliament, saying that I am not able to do anything. So there are positive sides and negative sides. The rule of law has been a casualty. Had we followed rule of law, these scams would not have taken place, be it the 2G scam or the game scam by Kalmadi or the building scam in Maharashtra. And even today in Hyderabad where you are sitting, I am talking some negative points about our own country because these points should work as alert points for you, a caution for you, so that you can prevent these kind of things from happening. In Hyderabad where you are sitting now, we have a putative chief minister, a chief minister in waiting, living in jail. We have a minister, a former minister in jail. We have a couple of IAS officers who are supposed to administer the state, cooling their heels in the jail. So these things happen because we have not been very successful in following rule of law. We have been flouting rules. They say Americans make laws to follow and Indians make laws to flout. We don't, as a nation, follow laws. We don't stand in queue. We cut corners. And the intellectual community has been staying away from politics. That is another bane of Indian democracy. And those intellectuals who came into politics came a cropper. For example, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, we have here. He was a very successful IAS officer, a bright man. He stood first in the UPSC exam at national level. He flouted a party, but he could not make any headway. So the intellectuals, when they come into politics, they are not elected. A party doesn't succeed in the hustings. So they get discouraged and withdraw. So those who are in politics are concentrating only on elections, winning elections, spending money and winning elections, and waiting for the next elections for 5 years, till then making money that they have spent in elections and making money for spending in the future election. So much so making money becomes the constant activity of a politician. That, I hope, would not happen in Bhutan. These are the lessons you have to draw from our country. The frugality in public life, which was very much in evidence during the first parliament, second parliament, during the days of Prime Minister Nehru. Even there we had corrupt people, but they were taken to task, they were sent out of the ministries, they were divested of their power. The frugality in public life has to be restored in India. And the respect for law, respect for democratic institutions which have been systematically demolished, watered down, and the civil society. Even now, if somebody asks me, what is the future for India? How does India hope to come out of this quagmire of corruption? Even today, we are not 10% literate. There are states, even in Andhra Pradesh, where only 75% literate. 25% people are illiterate. They don't know how to write or read. This, after 65 years of independence, this is a failure of planning, a failure of execution, failure of administration. When you see the negative aspect, I don't know what is the literary rate in Bhutan. How many? Can somebody tell me what is the literacy rate in Bhutan? 54. Yeah, you are far better than India when in 47. When India got its independence, we were having only 35% literacy. But you have to take this literacy as a major challenge, because if you educate people, they will take care of themselves. The basic, most important areas for the people to develop are: 1, health; 2, education; 3, irrigation; 4, power; and 5, roads and building. The last 3 come under infrastructure. And in any budget, the planned expenditure should be considerable, at least 30% of the budget. For new projects, we have to allot money for new projects, be it irrigation, or be it industrialization, be it having power plants, which is an important infrastructure facility. We have to create wealth, and we have to ensure its distribution. If not equally, it's not possible to treat everybody equally, though it is a cherished goal of every nation to have an egalitarian society. In practice, it is not possible. What is possible is to banish poverty altogether, to banish illiteracy altogether, to banish ill health and discrimination and exploitation. These things we can do. We can have a minimum level, a benchmark of existence, and what kind of funds are needed for a family to live in dignity. And if you are able to provide that amount of money to the last family in your country, you have more than succeeded. Then I will dwell on the perils of neglecting democracy. What would happen if the elected representatives of the people don't care to listen to the people after getting elected, after getting into positions of power? What would happen if you lose contact with the people? If you cease to meet them, find out what is happening in their lives, or spare time for them to explain their problems and difficulties, and don't act to redress them, what would happen? What would happen if members of parliament like you go on shouting in parliament at each other, go on quarreling on small issues, and not discuss the important issues that are affecting the people? That is the process of alienation. You are alienating yourself to the people. Then people would slowly lose faith in democracy. Because when they are convinced that their problems are not solved, their grievances are not addressed through the system of democracy, they are not taken care of by their own representatives in legislatures, they will take to arms. There will be rebellion. There will be unrest. That is the price one has to pay if democracy is neglected. So friends, my humble advice to you all would be to study the way we Indians have lived in the last 65 years, how we made use of our constitution, which is even today the best constitution in the world, how we are able to use the reservation policy to bridge the gap between the haves and have-nots and encourage the sections of the people which have been neglected, insulted and exploited for ages, how we use the policy of reservation expounded by Dr. Ambedkar, and how the corruption has crept into the system, how the elections have been made very expensive, how muzzle, money, and mafia had come to roost in elections and in public life, how the intellectuals, the good Samaritans, the noble-hearted people have been keeping away from the very system of democracy, the parliament election, how they got alienated from the system. If you study these things, the positive aspects of Indian democracy and the negative aspects of Indian democracy and the pitfalls in the way of an ancient democracy like yours, I hope immense good will happen and we will progress much faster than India did, and I hope all the best to you. Thank you.